In this lesson, we're going to prepare babka, a braided brioche loaf, which traditionally originates from Eastern Europe and is typically filled with poppy seeds, chocolate, sugar, and cinnamon. We're going to make a slightly different version, one that's super delicious. We will be incorporating mortadella and lemon to impart a delightful boost of acidity to the dish. Moreover, a generous sprinkle of Parmesan cheese will make it even more flavorful. Let's start by listing all the ingredients we'll need for this recipe. We're going to require Manitoba flour, room temperature milk, fresh yeast, sugar, eggs, butter, salt, and crucially, lemons with edible peels, as we'll be incorporating the entire fruit. Additionally, we'll need Parmesan cheese and of course some very freshly sliced mortadella. We'll kick things off with the babka dough. The babka itself is a leavened dough made rich with eggs and butter. We'll kick things off by placing the Manitoba flour into the bowl of our stand mixer. This particular flour boasts a high protein content, which will effectively help in the rising process of our somewhat dense dough, given its rich fat composition. Within a jug, we will carefully pour in our milk, which is at room temperature. And we carefully crack our eggs one by one into the mixture. And 4 eggs. We'll gently break and beat them with a whisk. And this will be the liquid that hydrates our brioche. Meanwhile, we're going to incorporate the sugar into the flour. And the fresh yeast. There's absolutely no need to dissolve the fresh yeast in milk or water. We simply crumble it directly in with the dry ingredients. If we choose to use dry fresh yeast, that's perfectly acceptable. Just be sure to remember to have the required amount. Let's set up our stand mixer with the dough hook, which is ideal for kneading doughs that need a long gluten development. So we're going to begin by using a low speed to thoroughly mix together the flour, the sugar, and the yeast. The salt will be incorporated nearly last, specifically just prior to gradually adding the softened butter piece by piece. Once the dry ingredients and the yeast are combined, we'll now proceed with incorporating the milk and eggs. We let the flour absorb the liquid completely, giving it sufficient time to do so. And now, let's slightly increase the speed of our stand mixer. We'll let the dough develop its gluten. When it's fully developed, which means it will cling to the dough hook, we'll then incorporate the salt, followed by the butter, adding it gradually, one small piece at a time. At this juncture, we can now stop our stand mixer and proceed to fold over our dough. When you're preparing brioche and other leavened doughs, it's really crucial to frequently fold the dough over. This ensures that you incorporate all the flour from the bottom of the mixing bowl. It's important to keep in mind that all flours differ, so we may need to incorporate a little bit more milk into the mixture. In this instance, I believe I'll incorporate a couple more tablespoons of milk into my dough, beyond what the recipe specifies. So we'll go ahead and add a bit more milk. The dough should be soft. It's a brioche and we want it to be nice and fluffy. Let's increase the speed of our stand mixer somewhat and then wait until the dough has achieved perfect gluten development. The dough has now completely wrapped around the dough hook, so we should pause the mixer. Push it down and we can proceed with the salt. The salt is invariably accompanied by a small quantity of liquid. This will help it to fully dissolve and properly integrate into our dough mixture. This kneading stage will last approximately 5 minutes. During this time, we will perform a test to ascertain if our dough has achieved the correct gluten development. Only then will we be able to gradually incorporate our softened butter piece by piece into the mixture. All right, we've reached the point where we need to check if our dough is prepared to incorporate the butter. So what next? We're going to perform a window pane test. We'll take the dough off the hook and carefully stretch it out. When we observe that our dough is able to form a thin, translucent membrane, we are then prepared to proceed with the crucial step of incorporating the fat into our mixture. So we'll set it to speed 1. Then we incorporate the butter gradually, allowing each addition to fully absorb into the dough before introducing the next portion. We'll proceed with adding the butter, always a small piece at a time. Please don't rush because there's a generous amount of butter and we need to allow the dough sufficient time to absorb it gradually. If necessary, we'll slightly increase the speed. And if, as it's happening in this instance, our dough separates because the dough hook isn't catching the bottom of the stand mixer, we'll simply stop the mixer and then fold the dough back on itself. Place another small piece of butter in. You can see how the dough begins to transform, growing glossier and more elastic. Remember that the dough will remain pliable. It won't be a tough or dense mixture, so be patient and avoid incorporating any additional flour. Another little piece, and I'll keep going like this until all the butter is used up. The dough is now fully prepared. As you can observe, it is quite soft and enriched with butter, and we will be utilizing it chilled. The dough is fine like this. Don't add any more flour. Let's stop our stand mixer. We're going to take the dough off the dough hook. I am using a dough scraper to assist me with this task. Now, let's turn our dough out onto a lightly floured surface. Once again, the dough scraper proves to be very useful for us in this situation. We're going to proceed to give it a more uniform shape using a few folds. We'll set it aside to rise in a bowl, which we will cover with plastic wrap until it has expanded by 1/3. Remember, don't let sweet leavened doughs double in size, as is often believed, because that will exhaust the yeast's activity. So, 1/3 of the size will be more than enough before we proceed with the filling and the second rise. The initial rise should take approximately an hour, and during this time we can prepare by slicing the mortadella and the lemon. Here we are. The initial rising is complete. Next, we will roll out our dough on the workspace and generously stuff it with our delicious mortadella, zesty lemon, and savory parmesan. I'll then lightly dust the surface with a bit of flour and turn it out. With the aid of a rolling pin, we'll proceed to stretch the dough, aiming to form a rectangle that is as uniform and consistent as possible. In terms of length, our aim is to achieve a rectangular shape that precisely aligns with the circumference of our baking pan. In this specific situation, we will be utilizing a bunt pan. However, feel free to substitute it with a loaf pan or a simple round baking pan to shape the spiral. Alternatively, you can simply set it directly on a baking sheet to bake. We're going to spread out our dough well. Let's use our hands to help give it the most regular shape possible. It should be approximately 1/2 centimeter thick. If it's very hot, put it in the fridge for about 1/2 hour, and it will be much easier to work with. Now, let's begin to generously fill our dough. First, we'll take the mortadella and spread it evenly across the entire surface of our rectangular dough, ensuring good coverage. Then we'll arrange the lemon slices. Mortadella, lemon, and parmesan is an incredible combination. A piece of advice: the next time you're serving an aperitivo and placing mortadella on the board, try adding some lemon zest, a touch of juice, and a sprinkle of parmesan. You will truly see the difference. Now let's proceed to distribute our mortadella. I'm Roman, so I prefer it thinly sliced. So here we are, wonderfully stuffed. I selected mortadella because as it bakes, its fat will melt, making this brioche incredibly delicious and rich. And then on the surface, since we'll be slicing it, it will become quite crispy. So we'll have one section that's incredibly melt in your mouth and another part much like chips. Okay, now let's continue with the lemon. I sliced it with a slicer. You may easily cut it with a knife, but the crucial point is to slice it very thinly because, as you'll observe, we're utilizing the entire lemon, including its edible peel. The acidity of the lemon combined with the fat from the mortadella will create an irresistible mix. Now we'll sprinkle it with some parmesan. If desired, you can add some pepper at this point. However, I prefer to sprinkle it fresh on the babka's surface after it has baked. So we'll now proceed to roll up our brioche. We need to make sure to roll it up quite tightly and securely. So here we are. Now comes the one slightly challenging part of preparing our babka. We need to cut it along its length and then proceed to braid it beautifully. So we'll take a sharp little knife, leaving a section where the brioche remains joined at the top, and then we'll proceed to cut it. Keep the baking pan close at hand, as the next movement needs to be swiftly performed without any delay. Now, let's begin to braid it. As you observe, you must be extremely swift. Otherwise, our braid will surely unravel and fall apart. Let's get our pan ready. 1, 2, 3, let's get going. We've successfully done it. Now it needs to rise for a second time. It should reach approximately the top edge of the baking mold. After that, we can bake it. The babka is ready. It has risen to the rim of the pan. Now let's give it a glaze. We'll add some flaky salt, which isn't mandatory, but it's perfect here. Then we'll bake it. Here I have a beaten egg with just a splash of water. You have the option to use an egg with some milk, or just milk on its own. Or you could even choose not to brush it. The egg will certainly ensure that your chosen decoration adheres well, whether that be poppy seeds, sesame seeds, or even flaky salt. So, after you've thoroughly brushed all sections of the dough, let's distribute our Malden salt. Keep in mind that the brioche is a somewhat sweet dough, so the savory contrast is always very pleasing. We're ready. Into the oven. It bakes at 180 degrees for about 40 minutes. Should it appear to be browning excessively during the initial baking phase, we will simply cover it with aluminum foil. The babka is now ready. We will let it cool for around 10 minutes, then carefully remove it from its mold. Our babka is now ready. It's cooled, the cheese has settled in, and the mortadella's fat has been absorbed into the brioche. Let's go ahead and flip it onto a plate. Here it is. It's soft, it's streaky. We have some crispier sections and some softer sections. We have the lemon's acidity, and the mortadella's fat will make it truly delicious. Here's my lemon, mortadella, and parmesan babka. Within our babka, you'll discover a true symphony of flavors. We get the pleasant acidity from the lemon pulp, the fragrant aroma of its zest, and also the rich, well-rounded taste of the mortadella. Finally, there's the parmesan, which ties everything together with its savory flavor. Seriously, you have to try it.